Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
Good evening, I'm Stevenson Manners, your host of your weekly program, Your Voice with the NRP. It's sponsored by the Nevis Reformation Party, Nevis' oldest and most transformative party. And on a weekly basis, from 8:30 to 10, the leaders of the Nevis Reformation Party make their way to the studios of Ron Radio to talk to you and hopefully getting response from you as well. I get a sense it's going to be a very exciting Monday night as we make our way up to 10 o'clock. Now, of course, when we resumed in 2022, the decision was taken that on a weekly basis we will provide a platform for each of the 5 candidates of the Nevis Reformation Party. So we started on January 10th with party leader Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge. Then on the 17th, the Honorable Cleo Stapleton Simmons, the deputy leader. And on January 24th, that was last week, we had J.D. Keynes. And I can't believe it, but the first month of 2022 has slipped by. It's January 31st, and tomorrow we will be into the brand new month of February, and of course, the shortest month of the year. And if we're not careful, events can overtake us. So we've got our eyes on the ball. I remember well, in October of 2021, a journalist asked the Prime Minister of Barbados if there's likely to be a poll in Bimshire by the end of the year. She said it would be irresponsible. Lo and behold, on just after Christmas, on December 27th, she announced a poll giving the minimum of 22 days. And of course, she exacted a clean sweep on the electorate. Literally caught the opposition with its pants down. We can guarantee you that won't happen in Nevis. So tonight in the hot seat, we've got Dr. Patricia Bartlett of Brownhill, of course, and the NRP candidate for Nevis 2, charged with the task of taking down the person who many regard as the greatest impediment to progress on Nevis. She got a massive assist this weekend when one Calypsonian, going by the moniker of the Maestro, found the incumbent representative of St. John's and Premier of Nevis guilty on many counts. So many promises while he was in opposition about what would happen at the Van Samry International. Nothing has happened. Incomplete water taxi pier, Mondo Track, hospital auxiliary wing, no geothermal, no one and only, and the investors still lagging out at sea. Tonight you will hear from his rival competitor, Dr. Patricia Bartlett, and you know nobody does it like she does. Good evening, Doc.
Good evening, Steve. Thanks for hosting tonight. It's a pleasure to be back. It's been a while because these cycles I think they're very, very short in the one sense, and then very long in the other sense. But I'm glad to be back nonetheless. Time flies when we're here, and so before time flies and I don't get in most of what I want to get in, let me just, so I've not been on all this time, send greetings to my favorite niece in St. Kitts, Merle Johnson. I know you're listening, you're watching. It's always a pleasure to have you in my company, darling. My cousin Simlick, good evening in St. Kitts. To Hazel in New York, one of the biggest supporters that I have. Hazel, I really appreciate you, darling. And Julie in St. Croix. Julie, it's good to have you tuned in, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to at least shed some light on what is going on here in Nevis, and particularly in St. John's constituency tonight. Something I think that all of us ought to be aware of what is going on at home so that we can make informed decisions when polling time comes.
And of course, it's been a while, as you've said. I don't think you've been here for over a month. So what have you been up to?
Well, I've been trying to keep up. I've been doing the things that that I set out, that I understand that these are the steps I need to take if I want to get to that ultimate goal of representing my people. So I'm putting in the hard work, because there's nothing like hard work, and then Daryl would have said, when you would have done your best, well, your best is all you can do, So I'm going by what Daryl says, just do your best. And I'm really working hard, because I think that the people of St. John's, I think they deserve better. What we're getting is far from what we were promised. And I think it's about time that we held the representative accountable for what has not happened, because he has made so many promises, and so many of us, and I speak for a lot of people who don't have the courage to speak on their own behalf, because of course we didn't expect that we'll get to this point where our very government would be intimidating us, that we can't speak freely. So I'm putting in work, and I continue. And for those who have the courage, and the thing is, people have to understand, you have to make sacrifices in life. There are too many people who are sitting on the sideline, or they want to talk behind their hands and all that. It's about time we got bold. I don't think that the Premier could, victimize 11,000 plus people, and we have a lot of people who are disgruntled. So asking each and every one, if you feel it that much, you're so much of a nationalist. You're so much of a nationalist. You want Nevis to be for Nevisians and residents to be able to live in comfort and dignity. Then I think you owe it to yourself. You owe it to your island to get involved. And I want to make this appeal to other people to get involved. It is not just about me. It is not about me, as a matter of fact. So let me not say it is not just. It is not about me. It is about Nevis. It's about restoring Nevis. And we can do with some more help.
As it is every Monday night when we come here, it's about you, and your calls are invited. What we'll do, we'll give Dr. Patricia Bartlett an opportunity to roll out her program, and then at the top of the hour, at about 9 o'clock, we'll accept your calls. You can call 469-1616, 469-1700. Now, since you were last here, Dr. Bartlett, the Premier had two opportunities, and those are governance tools which allow him to interact with the people of Nevis so that we could get a sense of where we are going. Of course, there was the budget, the appropriation bill for 2022, and of course, last week he had his first press conference for the year. Did you get a sense that we know where we are going? Did you get a sense of optimism and hope as we move into 2022?
Steve, had I not been hearing the same rhetoric over and over, maybe, but I've heard the same thing. And also, the thing is, sometimes it's verbatim, the same exact words that would have been used before, just keep repeating. And it gets to a point where you just don't want to hear it. And even though I'm advised that I have to listen, and it is painful to listen, I had to. But I came away with a sense of hopelessness. I'm like, this again, the same thing over and over again. And I don't know if my feelings reflect what other people have been feeling. But some of the comments I've heard have not really been that, forward-looking. People are not necessarily looking forward to the Premier taking them any further than here. He has brought us this far, and we don't think that he's still capable of taking us, to the promised land, because none of the promises have panned out, up to this point. So I listened because I was forced to, but I didn't come away, any more enlightened than anything before. The day before would have been the same thing. I didn't feel any enlightenment and any cause for optimism.
Well, I think like the Calypsonian, the maestro, the general feeling in Nevis is that the Premier is a spent force. He has really outlived his usefulness as a politician here in Nevis, and the Calypsonian, in not most gracious language, told him that the right thing to do is to demit office, because really we can't continue with these strings of unfulfilled promises, fancy words which are not taking us anywhere. Nevis deserves better. So let's make a turn. I know some people may be hearing you for the first time tonight. As I've said earlier, this program is designed to give each of its candidates a platform to project themselves to the people who they hope, when the Premier finds the courage to ring the bell, that they will answer the call and move to form a new Nevis Island administration. So just who is Dr. Patricia Bartlett?
Well, I like to keep things simple, and I just want people to know that I'm from Brownhill. I'm the daughter of Maisie and George Bartlett. George was a fisherman, of course, so a lot of people, up Gingerland area and Church Ground and those places outside of Brownhill would have known who my father is. I'm from a relatively large family. Most of my siblings have been known on the local athletic scenes or in sports, and I've done a bit of that myself, and I've been involved in a lot of that. But most notable for me is my involvement in the community. I've been involved in community service since I was a little girl, taking water for old people and stuff like that. Then I became involved in organized voluntary work where I became a brownie. And for those who know what a brownie is, or for those who don't know rather, that is just like a mini or a junior Girl Guide. And so from quite early, I knew that I wanted to help people. I knew that I wanted to serve people. And so from then up to this present time, I've been involved in community service. I've been involved in sports club, you name it, whatever came up, that required volunteers. I was always at the forefront, particularly in Brownhill. And so my service record, I'm very proud of that. And so when I speak, even though I am not necessarily a boasting person, because they used to call you boasting when you used to go to school, just because you had the ability to do certain things that maybe other people couldn't do, but like I said, I don't mind presenting my service record. My educational exploits, I would have gone to Prospect School, so you'll hear me a little later talking about Prospect School and my expectations for that school as it relates to the development of the plant. And after I left Prospect School, I went to the Charleston Secondary School. After that, my tertiary education would have started in Guyana, where I became an animal health assistant. I came back, worked for a bit, then I went off to university. I graduated from Tuskegee University as a veterinarian on, I think it was the 12th of May, 1992. It is always on Mother's Day. Tuskegee graduation is always on Mother's Day. So I would never forget, that it was Mother's Day, because my proud mom was there to witness the graduation of her first graduate. And so I came back after I would have finished school. Shortly thereafter, I didn't spend much time in the USA because that's not where I wanted to be. I wanted to be home serving my people or continuing to serve my people. And so I returned shortly after that. I worked at the Ministry of Agriculture for 14 years before I strategically decided that I was going to retire at that point, just so I can get my hand on the little, as a poor person, get my hand on the little gratuity that was available so I could invest it before I got too old to be able to, or died before be able to enjoy that. And so that's what I did. And however, I was able to negotiate rather for continued employment with the government, because at that time we didn't really have any other veterinarian on island. And so I continued service. So I've been, and you'll hear some people trying to make a big deal out of people who are pensioners. I've been a pensioner since I was 45. But then again, I wouldn't expect that certain people would know that, because they've never really served in the system, and it seems like they have no understanding as to how it works. And so they think that if you're a pensioner, it means that you're 60. Well, it seems there's some confusion that they're not even getting the pensioner at thing right, because they seem to think that in order for you to get Social Security, you must just be 60. So those kind of confusion coming from the leader of the island. I don't understand, why he makes those little simple mistakes that people could, cross-check and make a liar out of you. But in any event, I would have done my service, and then I've continued for another 14 years, and so I eventually was fired. You could put it that way. Just a couple of months, mind you, before my official retirement. So I don't know what the gain was. I really don't know what the gain was, because it wasn't going to affect, the price of sugar. But just a couple of months before my birthday, my 60th birthday, I was asked to leave. To take up my Georgie bundle and go. And some people seem to think that that was a big deal for me, But if I would have worked for so long, a couple of months shy of when I would have officially been retired, now why would I have a gripe against the government, And so people have been using that. And I really don't want to get too much into the mud, but since I brought it up, if I can go on just a little bit, just so that people can get clarity, because some people just want to fool other people who they think are less intelligent than they are. So it has been circulated by no less a man than the leader that I did not get something. And every time you hear that about someone who is in opposition, they didn't get something. And I just want to say tonight, and make it clear, crystal clear, that I never wanted anything. I never asked for anything. When I first retired, I asked for an extension. That was the only extension letter I have ever written. And now these people want to suggest that because I asked for an extension and didn't get it. Now, why would I be asking for extension just a couple of months shy of retirement? That makes sense? It makes absolutely no sense. But I just wanted to put that out there, that I never wanted anything. I never asked for anything. And I've been very careful, because I know what the code of conduct is as it relates to civil servants. So I was not going to ever approach the leader, on matters such as those. But for all of the communication that we've had, I've been very careful. I saved them. I save every communication that we would have had. So if I were to, and like I said, I don't want to get into the mud, because I don't want anybody to drag me into the mud and get me, dirty like them. So I'm just going to leave it right there. If it comes up again, then I guess I'll have to, continue. But I think that this is an appropriate time to just leave it right there, since we don't want our show to get to that standard. We're not going to let them drag it down there. So that's basically, in a nutshell, who Patricia Bartlett is.
Quite a varied career, one dedicated to service. And after all of that, here you are, still willing to serve.
Always willing to serve.
It's interesting. Now let's take a little backdrop of St. John's constituency, because I've heard you say this on several occasions, that the constituency of St. John's is the most impoverished in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Hard to believe when the leadership of the island comes from St. John's. Hard to believe when the leadership of the country has had his hands on $371 million to spend as he wished. Could you tell us more about the backdrop of St. John's being this impoverished place?
Well, I don't want it ever to seem as if this is my data, because it is not my data. I've heard people trying to refute the fact that indeed in St. John's, that the St. John's is the most impoverished constituency in the whole of St. Kitts and Nevis. And this is information coming from the last Caribbean Development Bank poverty assessment survey that they would have done. And until the other one becomes available, because I understand that the field work would have been completed since 2019, and we're still not seeing the final report from that survey. So we don't even know. And I know that, well, let me not say that I know, but I suspect that we have not made any gains as it relates to our poverty position or relative to the other constituencies. I want to believe that we're even worse off than we were then, because of the impact not only of COVID, but about the policies pre-COVID, because our premier would have had time to do something, and we didn't see him do anything about it, about poverty in St. John's. What we saw, at least even this year, when allocations were made for social services, the allocations were cut, and this is a critical period when people who are in that category, the very vulnerable people who are just on the margins, who are easy to be pushed, over into poverty, and not only poverty, but it gets a little more, what it gets worse than that. There's a category that I don't necessarily want to, introduce all these technical terms. But anyway, so people have been on the fringes. The point I want to make is that people have been on the fringes, and we have seen no policy to save those people from going over the edge. And so I suspect that we have even more people in St. John's now who are impoverished than we had from the last survey. I heard the Premier make mention that it is not as bad as we say, But if you have the data, you know what it is, then say what it is, and let us compare. Don't just hang it out there that is not as bad, but you're still not telling how bad it is. So I don't have the most recent information, and I suspect that it is, somebody may be holding on to it because, sometimes reports come, and because they don't really want people to know the true nature of what is going on or the real status of the country. Sometimes these things get, put to the bottom of the pile, and it's not being, shared like it should be. Because I think that is one of the conditions of these international and regional organizations, that information should be shared with the entire population, so we are all aware, of what is going on, and we'll be able to together, take the remedial action that is necessary, to help people. Because you would think that maybe your neighbor is doing well, but when the report comes out and it said 9 out of 10 people in a particular category, then you start counting and you recognize that you are not in that category. Then you recognize that you're the 9 people who you thought were okay. They're not as okay as you thought. So you could not do anything because you have the false impression that everything is going good and people are almost on the same status as you, when in fact it may not be that way, So I don't want people to have to guess as to what is going on. We need to know what is going on. I'm not trying to suggest that you bring it down to the granular level. So you said, well, this person, Steve, is poor, or that person is poor. But we need to know what percentage of our people in St. John's remain poor, or what percentage of people would have joined the ranks of the poor.
It's hard to fathom, really, because, of course, the Premier's mantra for a very long time has been people matter more. Of course, another Calypsonian in St. Kitts blew that out of the water as well. So those were mostly sweet-sounding words. But do you get a sense that the Premier has not had a finger on the pulse of what is happening in his own constituency? Or he's been riding too high on the horse coming down the hill? Or is it that he needs a special advisor for St. John's?
I don't really necessarily need a special advisor for St. John's. The advisor that he has is a community advisor who is being paid $9,000 a month, and I would imagine being paid that amount, you can't just focus on St. Thomas's. I would imagine that is an advisor that you would use for all the constituencies. But I don't know that that would solve the problem. I think the problem that we have here is the lack of engagement. I don't think that the Premier necessarily has the best interest of all of the people at heart. I'm not trying to suggest that he doesn't have the interest of some people at heart, maybe some, because it is quite obvious that all of the people are not benefiting the same way. It is quite obvious that some people are being selected to be empowered at the expense of others, and I don't think that he has engaged himself on the same level that we're expecting, and I keep telling people, we have a fundamentally different perspective, the Premier and I, as it relates to nation building and humanity as a whole. Because while he would want to play the king and be selective about the people who should be empowered in this small little island, I think, contrary to that, my thing is, I believe every individual has a right to live with dignity in the land of their birth. And even people who would have joined us as residents, non-nationals, I think once they come here and there's enough, we should share. That is just my basic concept. Those are the principles that I believe strongly in, the principles that, I was brought up, I was taught these principles about fairness and about equity, and about looking out for your brother man. Everybody should be able to live, get the opportunities. You don't be selective about who get opportunities. So what I'm seeing is there are people who, for instance, someone would have a job with government, and because that person has been selected by the king, that person gets a contract, and that person gets other exposures as it relates to being able or others, get other streams of income. And I was like, how could that be fair when you have so many people who are out of work? In an environment such as this, even if you were not moved before to consider the ordinary man, the circumstances surrounding COVID and the loss of jobs and all that and livelihood, that should have at least been something that would have pricked his conscience and say, you know what, maybe I should take a second look at my policy. Maybe I should take a second look at the way I do business. And I think that at that point, maybe he could have been re-engaged, or, well, like I said, he was never engaged anyway. He was disengaged. So maybe he could have engaged at that point in policies that would consider the plight of many people, particularly in St. John's.
Very shocking at his press conference. For the second month running, he didn't have figures for unemployment in Nevis. How do you keep a gauge on what's happening in your country when you say that we want to recalibrate and rebuild Nevis if you don't know where we are? I don't understand it. That's why some people are saying his press conference was flatter than a punctured tire. Really didn't offer anything significant. I know you've got some other issues to talk about specific to your community, which tells about the plight. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a break, our first break of the evening, and when we come back, your calls are invited. Join us, 469-1616, 469-1700. You're listening to Your Voice with the NRP. We'll be right back.
Your voice, your voice, your voice with the NRP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
One point in time, just a few short years ago, Brown Hill, where you played your netball on the top of the hill, was a crown, the jewel in the crown. There was Brown Hill Communication. Lo and behold, we woke up one morning to find that it is gone and it has not been replaced. By my recollection, the Four Seasons and the government, only those may have exceeded the Brown Hill Communication in terms of the people, number of persons it employed, not only from Nevis, but from the friendly neighboring island of Dominica. Where has it gone? What has happened?
Well, I think that is a question that the Premier is going to have to ask. I cannot answer that question. I can just continue to ask in the same vein, because we would really like to know what is the plan. Because since Brown Hill Communication would have been closed, I think that was in 2018. In 2018, no, sorry, it was August in 2019.
No, I think it happened before that. Well,
I think it was August in 2019 that it was closed, and at that point in time, I think they would have laid off 138 people, because I think that is what I would have seen in the archives. And since then, I've just heard that the Premier would have said to the people who were being laid off at the time that he was on it with them, he was in it. He said, and I want to quote him. He said, "I give you my solemn word that we would get through this difficult time together." And I don't know what period of time he was making reference to. If he just meant the week that they got, laid off, and he was going to just take them up to the point where they got their severance pay and then left them hanging. But subsequent to that, he would have encouraged all 138 of them to apply to the International Bank over in Barnscott, which really he knew that the scope wasn't there, the capacity wasn't there to absorb all these people, but yet he would have said to them, and most of them probably would not have qualified anyway for that level of, because you need a financial background, obviously. And so he would have given them that hope. that don't worry about it, you're laid off from Brown Hill Communications, but you can get something to do over here if you just apply, and show up, and so I at that point I was like, is he really being serious? He just, I don't like to see big people fool, younger people, and most of these were younger people who were operating, at the Brown Hill Communications. And since then, I have seen no effort whatsoever. I have not seen it. Maybe someone else might be able to point me to where it exists. But I've seen no evidence that they really tried hard enough to get a replacement for Brown Hill Communications. There must be something else that building may be fit for purpose for, even if you could not attract a call center, that kind of operation. But something I think could have been done, and I don't think that enough has been done. To just station a security guard there 24 hours is not good enough, because that did not bring back more than, well, that is just one job, and I don't understand how from St. John's, that is already so poor, you extract 138 jobs and you have no replacement for that. The little businesses around there that may have had a little spin-off from it have since suffered, I know, because my good godfather there, Luther William, he had a little shop there that occasionally you'll see people there, patronizing. He basically had to go sit down because he wasn't getting that kind of traffic anymore after you close, and 138 people can, no traffic whatsoever going to him. And then, of course, the other shop across the road, Olga Brown, where most people would remember Olga Brown shop. And so the businesses in the area have suffered, and there's nothing there to replace it. As Auntie Shelley would say, nothing a kip. You're going Brown Hill and nothing a kip. And in St. John's in particular, I don't know. Well, I guess when you go down to the port, that in that area, well, you have the commercial activities going on there. But as it relates to further up, especially in Brown Hill, I think something could have been done. I think we have what we call the Nevis Investment Promotion Agency, NEPA. And all I'm hearing is that they should be rolling out something electronic so that you could do business, or you could, advertise a little bit. But I'm not seeing them actively involved in getting us business or investments. Because since 2017, coming forward, we have not seen any investment, any foreign direct investment into Nevis. Nothing, at least nothing that I could appreciate. Maybe someone else is in a position that they, could see minute things. But we have not been able to appreciate anything that made an impact. And particularly in Brown Hill, and it bothers me, because that is my area. That is the people, I'm surrounded by the people who I interact with, on a daily basis. And those are the people who, when they squeeze their foot, I feel it too. I feel it because we have that kind of connection. I'm not trying to suggest that nobody else have that kind of connection, but we have that kind of connection, and I would really like to see something else being done. And of course, I don't think that we have tapped into our people in the diaspora. We have not presented them with, because if you look at the call center, this was a turnkey ready project, if really we had pursued even a a call center, I'm sure we should be able to track something. I'm not trying to suggest it might have been at the same level, but we have done nothing, and I can't understand how that could be fair, particularly to the young people who are coming out, who are coming out of school, because I think we have two cohorts of young people who would have left school since the pandemic, and nothing is available. And what we're seeing is almost like, I don't even want to go there, because I see them trying to send home some older people once you get close to 60, not recognizing that these people have commitments, So you have poverty on the one end when you're young, and you have poverty on the other end when you're old. And that can't be fair, because you have some people who have worked and worked hard for government, and then for you to just ignore the fact that they have commitments just so that, because you're trying to make way for younger people to come in. But you're not solving the problem, because you still have unemployed people who you're pushing towards the poverty line again, And so that strategy, I don't think that strategy is necessarily sustainable, So we have to at least offer people opportunities, and that is what I think is lacking. That is what is lacking, opportunities. And so I digress a little bit, because I said I thought that maybe you should engage our people in the diaspora more, because we can't just sit here and wait for somebody to come from Dubai or wherever, because we have a lot of people in the diaspora who maybe if we were to present to them proposals for them to get involved, we could stimulate some activities. And I'm hoping that something would be done, because trust me, we're being listened to. Had an experience last week which we'll get to, but we're being listened to. So I'm hoping that after tonight, somebody would call somebody tomorrow and say, try see what you could do for Brownhill Communications. Try see if it could have some little business going on there that could offer some employment to the youths in the area. It is not good enough for the Premier every week. It's like a recital now. Every week is like a visitation. He's on his mic talking about the NRP candidates, and they're not even opening a fake shop to employ one person. Even if the 5 of us were to do that and employ 5 people, is not going to make a significant difference, because at his disposal, he has all the resources. And since he took office to this day, he has spent over $1.1 billion of all the money that he could get his hands on. And that includes your taxes, the fees, the budgetary support that you get from St. Kitts, and even loans. He has used up all of $1.1 billion and has created, from our estimation, he has created 12 jobs. 12 jobs with his Herculean efforts. 12 jobs. And then he wants to make it seem as if it's the NRP fault. It's always NRP fault. But that can't fly. You can't continue to do that. It's just a distraction. He has to get serious about creating employment for the young people. Because we have too many of our young people who are unemployed. And what I understand is that since the pandemic started, and this came from him, if I'm misquoting him, I'm sorry, but I think in his press conference he said that in 2020 we had 36 new patients, psychiatric patients, 36. And I think then again in 2021 we had an additional 36. So you do the maths. Right there you have 72 people in 2 years who have joined the ranks of psychiatric patients. I don't know how many of those were youths, because the information was not broken down. But we need to get serious. It means that there's too much stress. There is too much stress in the population. And it's unsustainable. We can't continue like that. Because before we added those 72, we would have had, from what I understand, over 200 before. I'm not really seeing them in Charlestown, But obviously, this is cause for concern. We cannot continue like this. Because when you have kids leave school, they did well, they did what they were supposed to do. We're asking them to apply themselves, to do well in exams and all that. We standardize these exams and say, okay, you have to compete and all the rest of it. And when they would have done well and come out of school, for them to sit home and have nothing to do, that is cause for concern. Because they sometimes get idle. And we understand sometimes when they get idle, they get into things that, they ought not to get into. I don't know, mind you, how many of those would have been psychotic events related to the use of maybe, drugs or whatever. I don't know. I'm just saying it's a possibility. And when you leave kids who seem not to have any interest in what's going on, because they don't participate, because they have been left out, no policies have been created to involve them to the extent that they ought to be. Because once you leave school, you want to go and work. So we need to start creating employment opportunities for our youths. And back to Brownhill Communications, I am parochial, so I love to know that things are happening in St. John's. I love to know that things are happening in Brownhill. And I think that because the Premier is from there, man, do something for Brownhill people now. It can't just be about the select few. It can't be. That can't be conscionable. Do something, please, Mr. Premier, before you leave office in the next couple of months. Please, just do something, if you can, to help out the people.
Good opportunity here to segue into diaspora involvement. I know you wanted to defer it for a bit, but I thought it was a very important point. The NRP engaged the diaspora in a virtual meeting over last weekend. Tell us about that.
Yes, that was our first engagement with the diaspora. I think it was a meaningful exercise. Of course, it was the first one, so we had a few little technical issues, but we proceeded to them, we worked them out, and with a few challenges that we had, I think we had a good meeting at the end. The thing is, the feedback that we got up to this point from the attendees was pretty encouraging, and I think that they like the fact that we were reaching out to them. Obviously, we can't be there physically, because of all the challenges that we would have in terms of, moving back and forth, and so it was very encouraging afterwards, to get the feedback from these people. And what we try to do, we want to make sure that we engage all the people in the diaspora. We don't want people to limit themselves. And what I think I would have said at the end, in trying to wrap up at the end, I was encouraging people to make sure that they have a balanced diet, a balanced political diet. You cannot just take one part of the story and not the other part of the story. It must be balanced. And the reason why I say that is because I know that some people hug the airwaves, and so some things are being fed to some people, and they're taking it as gospel. Until you hear the other side of the story, you have not heard the story. You can't hear half of the story and think that you would have heard the story. That is only half of the story. And so encouraging people to get as much information as you can from both political parties. We would never say to you, don't study them over there, or don't listen to them over there, because every man has a story to tell. Let them tell their story. Their story is one that should be told on their performance. And if they're honest enough on their performance, and with less interference at the polling, at the electoral office, I can assure you that they would not return to office. I can assure you, I can make that assurance. If we were to limit, the interference, at the electoral office. So I would like to appeal to the people in the diaspora, stay engaged, listen to CCM, listen to NRP, and at the end of the day, I need for you, when you would have had a full meal of everything that is being offered, then you can sit back and you can ruminate on it. You can chew it over and you can digest it at your pace. So when you come to make your X, you will be well informed, and it would not be easy for anybody to tell you that in Nevis water is coming from the springs when we know that the spring dry. So we encourage people to stay engaged. If you didn't get an invitation the last time, because you had to sign up, because we're doing it by Zoom, then I suggest that you reach out to one of us, and we can always fill you in on the get the information to you so that you can join us next time around.
Now, I said from these microphones the Monday after the official opening of the Malcolm Gishard Park at Pinnes. I went there on the Monday and got a tour of the place, and was so impressed with about a dozen or so sixth form students who were engaged. They were basically selling to people like me Taiwanese products, about 3 dozen or so, if I recall. I hope that is not the end for these dozen or so people engaged to sell the Taiwanese project. Our Premier is also the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Taiwan has been here for 39 years, and of course they've been very good to us in agriculture. Of course, St. Kitts has the Eco Park, Nevis has its Spinners Park. But I personally think we need to step it up to another level. But I think we've got our first caller on the line. Good evening, caller.
Good evening, Steve, and good evening, Dr. Bartlett.
Hi, good evening, welcome.
Good evening. Dr. Bartlett, there are 2 groups of people in St. John's in particular that I believe it would be useful to tell them what an NRP government of which you will be a member can do for them. And well, they are throughout the island. Let me say they are throughout the island. One group is the single mothers who have to manage children and homes on their own with limited resources, and two, young people. I think young people, in going to vote, they want to know, well, okay, we're going to vote for Dr. Bartlett. Could share some ideas with us, say some things to get them fired up to vote and also get their interest. And so those two groups, and also Dr. Bartlett in relation to and Steve in relation to the communications, burning communications. When we set it up, we understood that because the nature of the developers, they make money quick, and then they turn over and then they go to some place else where they could get cheaper labor or better packages. So what we do, we don't just have one. You have one operating, but you have two in your back pocket. You're negotiating at the same time because the overall interest is to keep people employed. So the idea ought to have been, while Brownell Communication is in operation, you're actively looking for persons. And as Dr. Bartlett is saying, we should find some way to use the building and create employment. But the real miss has been that the government now didn't seek to find alternative investors to use up the space, given the fact. But when you're doing projects like that, you have to be reading and following what the tempo is, so that you would know that they pack up and go anytime. There was a company there before called Clay Harbor, and so we had to get them out, get in Brownell Communication, and then when Brownell Communication, we're looking at alternatives. Should they pack up and go? Because it's all about profit and the level of profit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So clearly these guys have missed the ball, Dr. Bartlett.
Well, clearly, but inexperience, I guess, is just a reflection of the level of inexperience amongst that group, because they would have tossed out the experienced leader. And it's critical that you try and learn something. You must have some institutional knowledge as to how to do certain things, and I guess that is why we suffer sometimes when we have these gaps, that are created. Because I think someone is trying to suggest that this is the time for the youths, and I am like, look at America. Who is running America? You see anybody less than 50 running America? How many of them? But people around here being fed this thing about follow me on Facebook, follow me, because I'm in the same league as Hush Puppy, So that is the kind of leadership that we're having now. It's all about a show. It's not necessarily about seriously contemplating where you're going to take the country and how you're going to do it.
We've got another caller on the line. Good evening, caller.
Good evening, Mr. Manners.
Hi, good evening. How are you?
Good. Good evening, Dr. Bartlett. How are you doing?
Good evening. I'm doing well, thank you. And you?
Very well. I have a little concern. I didn't hear you from the beginning. I think I was in and out, and I don't know much of what you said. But what I've noticed over the years, well, I'm on agriculture now because I know you're a doctor, a veterinary doctor, whatever. But I have noticed when you have an election and you elect ministers of government, then they select them to give them certain portfolios. Sometimes you would select someone to do, like the Minister of Agriculture, when really they know nothing about agriculture. But once you give them that ministry or that ministerial post, in a week time they know more than everyone else. And what we realize when these things happen, the country go backwards. I mean, I am looking at you. I don't know if NRP wants to do a shadow government and we could know directly whether you would be the Minister of Agriculture, which would be my choice, or what. Because if, for example, they put you in the Ministry of Public Works and Utility, I believe that would fail. But if they put you in agriculture, I think we would do a better job. And the reason why I'm saying this presently we have Alexis Jeffers, who is the Minister of Agriculture, and he is the federal, not only in Nevis, but for the whole federation. And what we are having, the petitions, I think it's people under the Ministry of Agriculture are getting more support, and Nevis is not getting any. For example, they are getting free feed in St. free medication, cheaper fencing wire, and people talk agriculture. Agriculture is not just food crops. They are also livestock also. So, and when you look at Beerford is now coming back on stream in St. Kitts, and Indian Castle is demolished. There is no more Indian Castle where we used to have these animals and stuff like that. So I am asking you, what do you think you can put in place for Nevis people to grow their crops and raise their animals, so we can alleviate some of these stuff, that these foreign food that's coming in, and to help us? The tourism, I'm not really into tourism. So I'm not a supporter of tourism without agriculture. You want to give the agriculture first, tourism after. So I want to ask you, what you think you can put in place, or would you be looking at Indian Castle to get some more livestock from abroad, build back up Indian Castle, so we could have our own stuff in Nevis? When you look at Statia, for example, and I keep making that point, Statia is only 8 square miles. Statia could hold into Nevis 8.5 times, and they are supplying Nevis with meat. So if you use a section of Nevis like Indian Castle, we could supply ourselves. So I don't know your take on that. If you could elaborate, thank you.
Doc, it's over to you.
Yes, well, thank you to the caller for the question. I just want to let you know, though, don't bet against me in the Ministry of Communications, because I might be a little more versatile and you give me credit for it. I think I'll be able to handle it. But I understand the concern that the caller raised as it relates to having the person who is best fit, to be the leader, because you have to lead by policy. You can't lead all the way down, and what I'm finding, and he made a fair point, we have a Minister of Agriculture who, by virtue of the fact that, I think, this is my, my take on it, I think he just wanted to get his hand on the land and housing component of the whole thing. But they come as a package. It's in the regulations. What happens is that it has to be the Minister of Agriculture who is, the person to whom land and housing is assigned. So I think he got that by virtue of that negotiation right there. I think it had nothing to do with agriculture. Agriculture is just by the way, because when you do the comparative analysis, you would think that someone else in that same cabinet, would have had a little more experience. I'm not trying to suggest that they had the highest level of exposure in agriculture, but at least they would have had the highest level within that particular cabinet, so if they were serious about agriculture, so that just goes to show the lack of seriousness, that is being employed here. If you were serious enough about agriculture, then you would have employed the person or deployed the person who is best suited to lead, and that has not happened. That had to give way for personal negotiations, and at the end of the day, we are, as Nevisians, suffer because we have not been able to move agriculture forward. All we hear is just the same rhetoric. Sometimes I'm wondering if these guys didn't understand that they would have said that already last week. Same rhetoric, and nothing is really done in agriculture in a meaningful way to move agriculture forward. I understand, because the thing is, we have to get back to basics. One of the things that we have to recognize is that we have challenges here that are maybe unique to us, because a lot of places don't have monkeys running around the place and they be able to. So we have to do agriculture a little differently. Our strategy has to be different. We have to invest more in protecting agriculture if we really want to grow the kind of plants that we want at the end of the day, and the kind of investment that is required. I don't know if we seriously have contemplated agriculture as an alternative to tourism. It may not be replacing tourism, but it should be, I think, contributing more to the GDP, and it is not doing that, and it has not done that now for quite a while. And that is concerning, because we have all these starts and stops. In one cycle, agriculture is awarded because of the circumstances, because it was COVID and the challenges that were anticipated. We said, okay, we will put some more money into agriculture, and then that fades away. And then next budget, you realize that what you got last time was taken away this time around, is not sustainable. And that is the issue that I think I have mostly with this particular administration. Things are not done in a sustainable manner. And so the other things that we have to address as it relates to land tenure, and those are issues that at a policy level should be addressed. You have too many conflicts between farmers. I think you would have noted a few weeks ago the conflict between Dr. Davey, who tried to establish some farm, and somebody else who just came off the street, who had not half the knowledge or experience as him, and who would have been used to get Dr. Daly off the land. Too much politics, and not enough seriousness in terms of our accomplishments. We are not setting goals that are reasonable. Every year you have this show, because it was this 2020, and it was that 2021, always with some nice titles, on subtitles, and at the end of the day, you cannot see the data to substantiate the claim that agriculture is doing as well as the Premier is saying that it is doing under the Deputy Premier. It's not there. There's nothing to substantiate that kind of claim. They just make the claim, hang it out there. At one point they even wanted to, they're always trying to fool Stevie Wonder, right? Because he have his impediments. And at one time they actually used the argument that if you go to the supermarket, or if when the boat lands, it does not bring cucumber, it means that we're producing enough cucumbers. That makes sense?
We've got another caller on the line. Good evening, caller.
Mr. Manners, good night.
Hi, good evening. Welcome.
Yes. Good night, Dr. Barkley.
Good night.
Yes. Mr. Manners, should I give my logo sign or what?
Your logo sign? You mean Montserrat?
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Montserrat, welcome.
Yes. Dr. Bartley, I've been listening to you a long time on the Tuesday night, long before COVID. One of the best nights I get with you when Mr. Stanley said that the reason why we don't get hurricanes because we have those hills. You remember that?
That was just a light moment.
Yes. Anyway, I'm gonna ask you, and you usually on that show big up your husband. Tonight, Mr. Manners asks, so is this about, and I don't hear the husband part. You get that?
Yes, go ahead, but I'll respond after you're done. When you hang up,
Okay.
I'll respond, yeah.
No problem. I'm gonna ask you two questions after the Mark show, and then maybe come after, and if we get back, then we ask about the Constituency. On the Mark, said that one of the candidates, well, it don't have to be you, I give him a name, was one strong supporter of his, and you don't know the reason why you depart. So it's just a curiosity to find out for you if you may strong supporter and you just disappear upon it and don't even say you're gone. That's you or is somebody else?
I think you should ask him that. I think it's the same number you used to get him that you used just now. So I think that you should use that and ask him. I can't speak for the man. I don't know who he's making reference to. And sometimes these guys have these fictitious characters out there that they make reference to, and they just want somebody to answer. But that's not me. It is not me.
Okay,
no, it can't
no
be me.
problem. We'll move on. He also said that on Facebook he put up his cooking on Facebook, and he was cooking some lobster, and that become a big charade.
that become a big charade. My opinion, sensitivity was not considered, knowing the pandemic and people losing job and whatnot. I mean, even the lobster no got just the word lobster alone, that one expensive dish. So I think you should be more considerate before you use that. Anyway, I will get to the constituency now. Since the Premier take office, do you see any improvement in your constituency? We will listen off here.
Thank you, caller.
Okay. Steve, I usually don't want to get into the lobster story. My father was a fisherman, so I remember the days when he used to give away lobster, so I don't even take on them kind of gimmicks. They're just gimmicks. But I do agree with the caller, though, on a more serious note, that to do that in the middle of a pandemic is very insensitive. There are people out there, and I know I was reminded tonight of my passion, because there are women out there with single mothers with children who are meeting in life very hard. Just last week I met a lady, and the story that she gave me actually mirrored a story that I would have heard before. She's telling me that it is so desperate she's so desperate to provide a good life, or even to provide food, because let me be correct. She said to provide food for her children has become such a challenge that she has seriously contemplated selling herself. And it tore me up, that just hit my spirit, it just touched my heart. And I had to reach out and touch her, even though she's not necessarily a friend of mine, someone bosom friend or anything. I had to reach out and touch her, because at that point I thought that it was appropriate, because she needed support, and so for him to do that in the middle of, sometimes I just don't understand where his head is at, but it is difficult. All habits die hard. That's all I'll say on that. But I don't want to take up time talking about lobster, only because it spoke to the level of insensitivity sometimes that is being displayed around here. And I think he asked me a question. What was the last question that he asked? I'm getting so passionately involved in the answer that I forgot the last question that he asked. But when I remember...
I think he was asking you about is there anything in the constituency that you could point to?
That's why I couldn't remember, because because really, in all fairness, and I don't want to be, I consider myself to be a fair person. If you do something, I'll give you credit for it. The Brownhill Road has been done, but remember that the Premier has been in the representative for St. John's and Brownhill by extension for almost 15 years, and that is the only thing that I can give him credit for. Left up to me, he could have taken away the walls and concentrate on something else, because I want to get to the Prospect School. I really want to get to the Prospect School tonight, because that is one of the disappointments that I've had. So outside of the delivering to Brownhill people, the main road, mine is just the main road. I'm not even so sure how long the main road, Brownhill main road. I'm not even so sure how long that strip of road is. But outside of that, there's been little or nothing that have been, developed, within St. John's, as far as I'm concerned, that I had any genesis in this cabinet. No one sat there and said, we're going to enhance Brownhill or St. John's. When I look in in Bath Village, I'm like, what is going on over here? This is the place that is a stronghold for the Premier. He has done nothing, absolutely nothing, neither physical or otherwise. I think if you were to go to Bath, I remember I told you about the empowering just a few people. If you were to go through Bath, you probably found one person who would fall into that category. One person that he has handpicked to say, I'm going to elevate this one person. Everybody else, I don't think their lives have been enhanced. Definitely, I've not seen it. And I'm hearing the cries. Because in the work that I do, the field work that I do, as it relates to helping single mothers with dependent children, that is an area that I have to make sure that I always go into, because the need exists. Outside, I have not seen it. It's sad to say, but if anyone else who is out there in where you land, or or whatever medium you're getting us this evening, if you know of anything that the Premier has done in St. John's, please enlighten us. I think we have another 20 minutes. So feel free to call in and just share so that everybody could be enlightened, because I'm not seeing it. When you go to some place like Church Ground, another stronghold, and Church Ground people were asked to do this one for Malcolm, do this one for Malcolm, and they keep hearing the same thing. And they've been doing it for Malcolm, but nothing for them. And I'm like, what have you done to deserve a second chance or a third chance? We'll be going on your fourth chance now. What have you done? There's nothing to show for it. And if all people don't wake up now, then we would be in turmoil for much longer than we ought to be.
As Dr. Bartlett said, if you can give a testimony, the numbers are 469-1616, 469-1700. We've got another 23 minutes as we make our way up to 10 o'clock. Now, Dr. Bartlett, I know you were keen to talk about what's happening at the landfill as well.
Yes, the landfill, I spoke about the landfill on a different medium last week. And of course, true to form, the Premier, when he listens, he consumes. He's telling everybody else not to listen to us, but he does. He listens. He wants to be the only one to listen and then filter the information. I don't know why he wants to do that. But of course, he wants to twist.
Hold it there, Dr. Bartlett. We've got another caller. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Good night, Mr. Manners.
Hi, good night.
Good night to my loving cousin. I'm enjoying every bit of it.
Good night, cuz.
I'm enjoying every bit of it.
Good.
I couldn't let the program finish and don't call. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Wow, you've got a good cousin there, Dr. Bartlett.
Yes, very supportive.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you're going to make the point about the landfill.
Yes, so of course, he wants to make it something personal now. No, I just want to state for the record, I have nothing personal against anybody who works at the landfill. I happen to know a few people there, well, at least two individuals who work there. Maybe I should have chosen my words more carefully, and maybe I should have suggested that they just deploy, or redeploy these people who are there, because obviously, the landfill is in a mess, and we have to accept these things if we're going to fix them. You have to come to terms. You must have a come to Jesus moment, if you're going to turn around your life. And likewise, if you're going to fix the landfill and the issues related to the landfill, it means that you must acknowledge that we are not on a good path. You can't tell me, as an division, or even as someone who lives in St. John's, you take a ride or even a walk, because a lot of us walk in these days, take a trip in that area and examine what is going on at our landfill and see if it doesn't make you come close to crying. Because what is going on there is not a good thing. It is not being properly managed, and I have nothing against the people who are there. The Premier said, well, the manager is his friend. But that is not enough to be appointed as the manager of something as important as a landfill. Solid waste management is serious business. In other places, you have to have a degree in civil engineering or in geography or something of the like. You must have at least basic. I mean, he said that the manager started as a driver, and that is commendable. You could move from there to there. But you must train the person who you're going to elevate. Because when you do that, you promote them to a level of incompetence that they didn't have at the lower level that they were at. And then this is the result of it. And so the Premier ought to understand, you can't go around appointing people just because they're your friend. I mean, it's true he has a driver's license, and that is useful if you're going to drive, the equipment that is there, and that is good. But that is in itself not enough. But this was not a personal attack on any individual there or the staff or anything. It's just that we are at a point where we have to recognize that the staff that we have, whatever their deficiencies are, we have to fix those deficiencies moving forward. As a matter of fact, we need to condemn that site. We need to close it down we need to identify an appropriate place, because there is not an appropriate place for it in any event. So I don't care who is started under, it is not an appropriate place, and it ought to be closed down because it's not properly managed, and we have things, it is out of control. Right now, it is being mismanaged. And so I don't want the manager to take it personal. I am not trying to suggest that you shouldn't be eating in your own country. I mean, I understand, some people have a lot of streams of income, that might not even affect him. But I'm just trying to suggest that it was not a personal attack. So the deflection, and always, the Premier ought to start being accountable to the people of Nevis and stop deflecting. It is not a personal thing. You don't personalize everything. And so if I upset the manager and whomever else by the statement that I would have made, I am willing to retract that statement and suggest that maybe we ought to train our people better. It is not a personal attack. I don't think you should be out of work. We all deserve to work.
Now, an earlier caller did mention women folk who have been extremely hit hard during this pandemic, and of course we must always be thinking about young people. I was making the point earlier before a caller came in that I saw some brilliant young Nevisians playing their role at the Pinnis Park, and I would hate to think that's the end of their existence. The time is right. It is past due that we need to engage the Taiwanese government to see how we could bring high-tech jobs to Nevis and by extension St. Kitts, and get our brilliant sixth form students, high school students involved at a higher level. I don't even know if they're thinking along that line.
Well, they may not be thinking along that line, but they've heard it, from the NRP platform. Time and time again, we were making those suggestions. But of course, sometimes, for most times, I don't think that they're seriously I don't think that they're serious about the business that they've been elected to do. Because we're not seeing anything different. No new initiatives. We're not getting our money's worth. You can't be paying a man twice for everybody else in the country working for, and he's not producing. Where else does that happen? It's not supposed to happen.
What are the young people out there telling you? What are you hearing from the young people?
Unfortunately, most of our young people are not engaged. They're not engaged enough. Compared to other places, where you have dynamic, young people who are getting involved in politics. In Barbados, you see Mayor Motley appointed an advocate, and he's a young person, 18 years old, and he's already involved. But I just find that there's a certain level of apathy in this country, and I don't know that we can necessarily blame the young people. I think it's all about the system. It's all about the policies, because a lot of them seem to think that they have no stake in the country anymore. I hear complaints. And I don't encourage it, because I know that the foundation is there for us to be able to move outside of Nevis. If we have the potential, we can move around in CARICOM and try to better our lives as well. Of course that comes with challenges. You have to find some place, that you can afford to stay and all that, if you're going to pursue. And within recent times, really, opportunities have been very scarce in any of the CARICOM countries. But I think one of the things I've been hearing is that foreigners are taking out all of the jobs. And I don't think that is necessarily a fair statement to make. But what I would like to see is for all of our people to get a fair opportunity. It can't be that you apply for something and your application goes to the bottom and you don't get to go through the process, being at least called in for an interview. I mean, that helps to sharpen your skills. Mm-hmm. These kids are not even getting that. Sometimes they'll tell you that they didn't even get an acknowledgement. I went someplace and, I submitted my CV and whatever, and they didn't call me, they didn't say anything, I didn't get any feedback. And that is not a good thing. Not only I can't tell the public, the private sector what to do. But I know most of the times they try to follow, best practices. But as it relates to government, most of the kids, you're like, oh, well, nobody called them, and there's this level of disengagement, and I think that there should be more outreach. We ought to have an outreach. There must be a link between the government and these young people. I know social services, and then they have a youth department. I don't know what level of collaboration would go on between them, but we have to be able to reach our youths, and we have to be able to make sure that we don't lose them at an early age, because you have a lot of them. Sometimes you go and you knock on the door and they haven't come outside for days. You know, they're not even engaging in sports. You know, they just stop living. And they're on hold, they're on pause. And I don't think that is fair, you know, to the young people. But most of the time they're like, well, we don't want to get involved because there's nothing in it for us. You know, they tell you that. They can't get no job. And most of the time it's like, what do you want to pursue? And sometimes when you have a conversation with these young people, they have ambition. They don't lack ambition. What they lack is motivation, and they lack drive. And they seem to think that they're on an island that no one cares, and that is unfortunate. We have to turn around that.
No, I was shocked beyond belief. I think it was in November when we have the annual 25 Remarkable Teens of 25 Remarkable Teens in St. Kitts and Nevis. There were only 3 from Nevis, and there's some interesting backstories. But we simply cannot sit on our laurels and allow that status quo to remain. How are we going to get out of this?
Well, we have to invest more in our schools in particular. You know, we have to provide schools. We have to do an assessment, you know, a serious assessment of what we have on the ground, you know, and where our deficiencies lie and how we can augment the system. It seems to me that things that have worked in the past, we might have disbanded them and not find replacement activities, or find policies that would bridge the gap. For instance, right now it's a challenge for some young people who are in school to do their studies online, you know, because that is required in some circumstances, you know, because of the COVID. And they don't have the required devices, you know, and NRP would have been saying before that there was a laptop program in place, but why disband something like that, you know? Why not try to at least enhance it, you know, whatever deficiencies there are, try to fix them, whatever issues there are, you know, you try to fix them and move forward. But I'm coming to, I realize that time is winding on, I didn't get a chance to focus on Prospect School. Okay. Because Prospect School is there, it's near and dear to me. You know, one teacher remarked on social media that since 2014, when she was a teacher stationed there at Prospect School, that there was a state-of-the-art plan for works that would upgrade Prospect School. Now, everyone knows that St. John's constituency is ballooning. You know, we have more people than we can hold seriously, you know. So there is need because more and more children are going to Prospect School, you know, so the demand is there for more space. And it got to a point where I think in 2020, I can't remember exactly, I think it was 2020, where they put on a drop shed to accommodate the expansion. One would think that the premier is from, you know, Brown Hill, and that was his alma mater, and he would pay some attention to that. At least if you weren't before, when you see the first drop shed go down, you should say, wow, you know, let's see. I think we would have promised, because you have to remember the promises that you make. And we would have promised that we were going to do something about the school, that we were going to renovate it, we were going to put on, you know, whatever brand new spanking, you know, that is your language, whatever brand new spanking ring you were going to put on, you know. It's time for you to wake up and recognize that you have a duty to fulfill that promise. And I give him a pass up until 2017, which, you know, he was not the premier then, so he did not have control over the finances. So I give him a pass up to that. But in 2017, when the time rolls around, you're elected in government. That should have been a priority. We're not supposed to be seeing now again in 2022 that you're putting on another drop shed. And as a matter of fact, someone said that the works had stopped. I don't know, you know, but it seems like maybe there's a resting phase, you know, associated with that, you know, drop shed that they were putting on. And the thing is, it's not like monies have not been allocated for education and for the enhancement of the plant, or what you would call the capital expenditure. You know, money has been there In every budget cycle, monies have been allocated. And I went through and I pulled from 2018, which, elections would have been late 2017. So it would have been 2018 really, give him credit for that. And I'm like, from 2018 up until 2022 budget, we would have allocated over $32 million. I think it was $32,791,000. So it would have been $32,791,000 allocated for capital expenditure in education. And you can tell me that you couldn't take a bit of that. I don't know how many schools in total that they would have distributed this for. And you couldn't take us and build something decent at Ivor Walters, which is our Prospect School. You still have buildings over there and blocks. I mean, I don't think that is acceptable. Well, it's not acceptable to me because that's my alma mater and I feel strongly about it. And I think that is a disservice that has been done to the people of Brownhill to bring these two drop shed, in a time like this when everybody else, having good foundation and building 2 stories and all the rest of it. And so much money has been spent. And you know what galled me most of all? In 2018, Prospect School wasn't a priority, so nothing was done for them in a significant way. But the Premier would have purchased, under the Premier's ministry, mind you, a property for the Premier's residence that costs $1 million US. That's 2.7 million EC dollars. That took precedence over the school. And I'm like, what kind of conscience you have? How are you serving your people? By putting your self-interest ahead of them. When we have kids who are going to school and you have to do the social distancing thing now, so that makes it even a more acute problem. And I was like, that is unconscionable, So I think that is something that, well, I don't think he deserves another chance anyway. He doesn't deserve another term, because we need to get that fixed. We need to make sure that people get the representation, for which they voted. And no hanky-panky. We can't take on, the infusion of, people who have no stake in the country, no large contingent of them coming in, on plane and can't even speak English. That ain't right. That is not right. But a lot of unconscionable things are being done just to propel, some people in power at the expense of people who are hurting every day. School children shouldn't have to live in those kind of conditions, having to be crammed together and not being able to at least observe the social distancing in school, And so that situation at Prospect School, I think, needs to be rectified as soon as possible. And we need to pursue the plans that have been shelved, obviously, since 2014. And that should be a priority. And I'm asking, because I know he's listening, I'm asking the Premier, make that a priority before you leave office. The roads, some of them not on priority. Some of the roads are not priority. So we need to make sure that we're serious about the education of our children.
So you've touched on Brownhill communication, you've touched on the landfill, you've touched on Bath Village and the ghetto that it has remained. Brownhill School, of course, your alma mater, his alma mater, and of course there's the Mondo track. Are there any other projects in St. John's impacting you at this moment?
Well, I have just been very upset about the way that the Bath Cemetery has been kept. And you and I know that is where we meet nowadays. I mean, as a matter of fact, the other day I was at a place and I said to the guy, well, we'll meet at the gravesite because that is where we meet nowadays. That is just the order of the day. Every day it seems like people are dying around here for whatever reason, But the way the Bath Cemetery has been kept has been appalling within recent times. I mean, they miss Mingo from Brownhill. Remember, he gave human service and he really miss Mingo. But the way that it is being kept, man, when I go there and I see bush covering graves, grass tall as your knee, up to meet your knees, and those kind of things, donkeys desecrating graves, especially if it's a fresh grave, they just rummage through, eat all of the edibles, and then they just scatter all of the artificial wreaths. I mean, I don't understand how anybody who is in charge could pass there on a daily basis and not be awakened to the fact that we think that it is insulting, to have our loved ones lying their final resting place in such level of indignity. You know, that ought to be an area that is well kept. But you know what? I think I inadvertently took over the directorship of that place last Thursday on Tell Me, because from this week I saw that the work started to clean it up.
Oh,
you know,
that's good.
So I have a job, you know. So the Premier ought to be, you know, thank you, Mr. Premier. I have a job now as the director. So he said it on Wednesday. I have a job as the director of the cemetery. So the work started there. So I would imagine that going forward, that the grass would be kept at a manageable level. It's not home by me and you. You know, it is a place where all of us have something in common. We would have left our loved ones there to lie and to rest. Rest. That is your final resting place, to rest in dignity. And I don't think that is a tall order. I think that is something that the average person could deliver on, you know. And so we have to get our act, you know, together as it relates to that. So going forward, like I said, I think it would be kept in pristine condition as it relates to cutting the grass and the Bubushan moon. We still have, though, the issue of the donkeys. They still have access, unlimited access to that place. And so we need to make sure it is a moral imperative that we fence that place. We must fence the cemetery, or else this is just going to continue. You know, and it pains me, man, because my mom is lying there, you know, and I don't like it. And I've spoken out about it. And the repercussions will come later. I don't care. You know, but we are to make sure that we address the issue. We have to fence that place, because there are other places. I mean, you go to Brownhill and there are walls all over the place, even where people don't live. Properties that don't have any dwelling house on it and well fenced. As a matter of fact, there's a property over there that, you know, they were putting back some fencing, and the fence looked better than the, you know, the property, you know, that is on it, you know. And I understand just the labor contract alone was over $100,000. Don't repeat after me. That is what I heard. So I think that we need to be serious about what we spend money on. You know, that is why I think we keep asking the question over and over, where is the 371 million? And those are the kind of things that would consume your money. You know, you just use money doing foolishness. And then the things that ought to be addressed, the things that are of concern to the general populace, are not being addressed. And I don't understand how you could come back in all good conscience to the same people. You made all these promises. You've kept none. You can't even keep the cemetery, man. Not even the cemetery you can keep up. No, man.
I think the problem is that the people who are resting there can no longer vote. And our leaders are not sensitive enough to understand, as you have said, that it's the final resting place. And as we write on the programs, and as we say in the funeral announcements, our people must be able to rest in peace. Now the director is telling me we've got another 2 minutes, so it's wrap-up time. Final 2 minutes are allotted to you.
Yes, I thank you for hosting me this evening, and I'm grateful for the people who would have tuned in, whatever means you would have joined us tonight. And I'm hoping that you would stay engaged, you know, listen to the two sides, like I said before. And I just want to appeal to the people of St. John's constituency to wake up. You know, I've said that before, wake up. There's a lady in Low Street who used to walk around and say, wake up, you know. Time for us to wake up, you know. And people, we need to wake up, because if we don't, things are going to get worse, and we're going to lose all this the coping skills that we have now. Not going to be sufficient to get us through, because the way things are being managed, in that we have had a king who has decreed who should succeed and who should not, and those who are being empowered are the lesser of us, and the masses are just suffering. And this is not a tenable situation. It is not a tenable situation, very untenable. We cannot continue to live like this, because our people deserve better. So I'm appealing to people, get engaged. Don't tell me anything about you don't want to get involved in politics, because at the end of the day, if you don't, all of us going to stay here and suffer. Some of us would be able to tolerate it a little better than others. So please, get engaged, stay engaged, and for the people who you can influence them to just look at the issues, look at the performance, or rather the non-performance of the sitting government, and see if you couldn't do better yourself if they were to give you that money. The money that they have spent, they have blown through $1.1 billion in the short period of time that they've been in office, in 4 years. $1.1 billion. And you'll see, if we don't have a turnaround in this country, don't encourage people from outside who have no stake in the country to get engaged just so that you can suppress the people who are going to be impacted the most, because they can't run go nowhere. It's only one passport they have, and it's a St. Kitts Nevis passport.
Dr. Patricia Bartlett, it has been an absolute pleasure hosting you. As usual, straight from the heart, shooting from the hip. We'll be back next week with Your Voice with the NRP, when Mr. Ron Isles will be in as we round out our slate of candidates. Change must come in 2022. Good night.
Your voice, your voice, your voice with the NRP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Nevis Broadcasting Company Limited or its advertisers.